How's it going, and welcome to episode 61 of On the Wire, a proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at OnTheWirePod. And of course, if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And I'm once again joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting, who should be followed himself at Hasting Kevin. Kevin, if I'm remembering correctly from our conversation last week off air, you got the place to yourself for a little while. How's single life treating you at the house?
Oh, it's going great. As I was sharing with Mike just the other day on Twitter, we got to spend some time outside each morning with my dogs and my coffee and just nothing else. Start scrolling through Twitter, seeing what I missed from the night before. It's been great all week long.
Yeah, for anybody obviously not aware, Kevin has the how to put it, the burden of packing up all this stuff so that you can, finally move back to Hawaii of all places. You can get that beer with that you guys were joking about before when you finally get there. So hopefully you can take on that burden for the rest of us and
it's all ready to go. I'm just waiting on the movers. So
there you go. Nice. All right. Speaking of talking to Mike off air, we do have a very special guest with us this week, and that is Mike Carter. He'll be joining us to break through some FAAB, also to talk about some streaming hitters, as his boss over at SB Streamer loves to do, as he mentioned on the podcast in the off season. Mike can be found writing regularly also at Fantrax, where you can find him breaking down the MLB bullpens. And, of course, as I mentioned, spstreamer.com, where he's regular hitter streaming articles should come pretty useful when breaking down FAAB options that we will be doing throughout the episode. And full disclosure, Mike is also my direct advisory and indirectly advisory to Kevin, as he's the founding member of the GLARF chapter of the Earth Leagues. And hopefully he doesn't hold him back from spilling his best targets for this week's FAAB run in front of us. But make sure you're following Mike on the Twitter at MDRC0508. And joining me now, Mike, to the pod. Thank you so much for joining us, man. How you doing?
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I was really thrilled to get the invitation to be on with you guys. I follow what you do. I think it's great. And the Pitcher List crew is an amazing group of people. So I'm really appreciative to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you for having me.
Mike, as the adage goes, flattery will get you everywhere. Let's get right into it, though. We got a lot of news and notes to go over. As I was going through the last couple of days, adding this to the show notes, I realized I could just keep going. Man, I got to cut this down a little bit. So, Kevin, though, I'm going to start with you. Over in Cleveland, Franmil Reyes was placed on the IL with an injured hamstring on Thursday. So we've had a couple of days to see how Cleveland's going to react. Have you seen any playing time shifts in Cleveland since his placement that are worth considering this Sunday?
Yeah, we actually missed Wednesday's game prior to being placed on the IL, and they moved Josh Naylor to DH. Owen Miller moved over to first base, and Ernie Clement took the place at second base there. Nothing really exciting with Clement. Now, the next couple of days got a little more exciting, and there's a couple of directions we can go. J-Ram was the DH on Thursday, and Clement moved over to third base. And Oscar Gonzalez played in the outfield. Gonzalez played in the outfield again tonight. Now, they got rained out yesterday, so 2 games in a row. Gonzalez off to a really nice start, 4 for 8, couple of doubles in the first 2 games. This is the guy, if you're looking for some power, this is probably the direction I would go. Now, the other option is Richie Palacios, was DH today. Now, he's been getting a little bit of playing time already. He was up when Kwan was out for a little bit, up again when Naylor was out for a little bit. So he's been getting a few at-bats throughout the season. He'd be more the speed direction if that's what you're looking at out of these guys. But it is going to take a couple of more days to really see who's going to run with the playing time here. And I'm leaning that it will be Oscar Gonzalez.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be the direction you want to go as well. If you are the one that lost Franmil Reyes to the IL, if you want to stick with that power in the power direction, Oscar's the one you want to be taking a look at for sure. All right, let's just keep going with the IL stints. Mike, we'll go to the Yankees for you. And you know what? Stop me if you've heard this before, and I expect to be stopped. But lo and behold, Giancarlo Stanton has been placed in the IL.
That's shocking. I didn't expect that to happen again.
Just shocked.
Wait, let me guess. Did it have anything to do with a soft tissue injury in his lower leg?
You know what? I think you might be right. It was ankle inflammation. So ding, ding, ding. We have a winner here. Just tell me, is there anybody that should be or has been benefiting from Stanton's IL with the Yankees?
The thing that's interesting is that the Yankees had relatively good health up until about 10 days ago. And now they've got two guys that need Tommy John surgery, and Stanton's hurt and banged up a little bit again. They've had a couple of COVID cases there too, I believe. So the guy that really stands to get some playing time out of this, I think, is Miguel Andujar. If you look at the lineups the last couple of days, today he batted fifth. Last night and Thursday night, he hit cleanup. And that's a pretty good lineup to be hitting cleanup in, last I checked. So I've just never understood why this guy doesn't get more playing time. He's 3 years removed from having over 90 RBIs for them. And so to me, it would seem that he would get the lion's share of the at-bats, especially if he continues to hit.
I think Andujar needs to get some playing time just so they can showcase him, so they can trade him for Ramirez or pretty much anyone. Packaging him with Clint Frazier is pretty much what anybody expects to do out of Yankees camp, right? Isn't that that's the standard? Oh no, the new one is Juan Soto. Juan Soto will be traded for Andujar somehow.
Yes, yeah.
All right, you know what, Kevin? I'm going to stick with the Yankees for you, and we'll talk about Josh Donaldson. He moved from the COVID IL to the actually injured IL, supposedly, with shoulder inflammation of his own. DJ LeMahieu was in the lineup today on Saturday, but he did miss a few games due to a wrist discomfort earlier in the week. So my question is, recently signed Matt Carpenter, of all players, a legitimate fantasy option in any particular format for at least the next week or two?
Just in deep AL only leagues where you need a body, I would say. It was pretty funny when he hit his home run last night. I was at work and I went through the kitchen and told my buddy, Matt Carpenter's going to hit 30 home runs for the Yankees, isn't he? That's the kind of crazy thing that highly unlikely, but I don't want any part of this. He did start a designated hitter again today for the third day in a row. I'm staying away, but it's one of those crazy things. He did this. Was that 2019? He was just awful. All of a sudden went on to have 4 months of the best of his career. I'm not counting on it. Don't see it happening. So I'm staying away, but it's just one of those things. Like I said, when I was talking to my buddy last night, it would be insane, but
he hit a home run in his first game, didn't he? He hit a home run in his first game.
It wouldn't shock me if he put together a good run here, but I won't have him if it happens.
All right. You're probably better off in that camp. But like you said, because you won't have him and because he's with the Yankees, it will. All right. Another IL stint, Mike. The Cardinals placed Jordan Hicks on the IL retroactive to May 25th with tight forearm flexor. You hate to hear that from any pitcher. Are you paying attention to Jake Woodford, who was the call up? He got called back up in a corresponding move in St. Louis.
I'm not sure how interested I am in Woodford. I mean, I think he's a guy that's kind of without a role there, it seems. I don't know. He's not really stretched out enough to be a starter at this point. It doesn't look like he's been pitching more in middle relief for them. Maybe they use him as a piggyback option at some point and, get him stretched out a little bit. They're really hurting for pitching right now, as we know. I mean, Hicks going down, Matz is out, Flaherty is out. They could really, really use somebody, and they dumped Carlos Martinez, who now just got an 80-game suspension for PED. So they really could use somebody to help him out there. Maybe they look at somebody that was designated for assignment by my White Sox and Dallas Keuchel. That might be somebody that they look at there. But for me, I don't think I really have too much interest in Woodford until I know a little bit more about what his role is going to be.
Yeah, it seems as though, the Cardinals were really quick to send Liberatore back down after his debut and then call him right back up when there was an opening there.
Pretty well
Liberatore
today too, I think.
Yeah, so I think Liberatore, for those who were scared away last week after he was dropped down, probably be a pretty popular option this Sunday night.
I would think so, yes.
All right, Kevin. In Detroit, Riley Green started a rehab assignment in the lower levels of the Tiger system. Question is, is he worth stashing now, hoping he gets a call up soon when his rehab stint is over? Or do you expect him to play a while in AAA, once he's proven to be actually healthy?
Kind of in between. 2 for 3 today, Saturday, as we're recording. With the stolen base, always like to see that stolen base when a guy's coming back from injury, that they're allowing him to make that attempt. I think we might be looking at a little longer rehab assignment or time in the minors, however we look at it, than we would for an established veteran, or if this had happened after he already began the season with the major league club, as all indication was that was going to happen. But now, why not just wait till Super 2 time, whenever that's going to end up being, and calculate that? So rather than just a handful of games, I'm thinking it might be more like 2 or 3 weeks, get us into mid-June. But to answer your question, yeah, if you have the room, you stash him now, because he's going to get more expensive by the week as it gets closer to his return, especially if we get an actual date.
Yeah, that Super 2 date, man, is always so much gray area there. Nobody actually knows what the date's going to be, as you mentioned. But my understanding of it is that it's based on the time all rookies put in to this year, to the year in question. And since there were so many, at least high profile rookies that started on the opening day roster or got called up really, really early, I almost got to imagine that Super 2 date is going to be a little bit later than it had been in the past. So I wonder how long that might have to wait. As you mentioned, it's usually like early to mid June. I wonder if there's enough rookies up now with the incentive that teams have to gain the extra draft pick if their players do well enough in rookie of the year voting. That Super 2 date might actually get pushed a little bit later into the month, or maybe even into July. But I don't quite know enough about the calculations there to give a specific date. It's just more of a conjecture and just what I'm thinking about.
For sure.
All right, Mike. Avisel Garcia also hit the quote, we don't know why IL, as he didn't get a designation. We obviously all know what that actually is. So there's no timetable on his return. Could return tomorrow, could return, later next week. For Miami, Jazz Chisholm is also missed most of the week nursing his own hamstring. And John Birdie and Joey Wendell came back from their IL stints for the Marlins. Question between those two guys, which one interests you more? John Birdie playing mostly every day in the leadoff spot, which he has been since coming back, or a regularly playing Joey Wendell in the middle of the lineup? And do you think either one of those are going to happen throughout the course?
It's a really interesting question, Adam, because I am sort of known among leagues that I play in for being kind of a Joey Wendell apologist. He's never really a bad guy to roster, in my opinion. He's kind of a Swiss Army knife. He plays multiple positions. He plays them well. He plays good defense, so he's going to play pretty regularly when he gets the opportunity. He's got a little bit of speed too. He can help you with a couple of bags during the course of the week and some batting average when he's going well. I like Birdie too, though, and I think he's an interesting guy. He's got third base and outfield eligibility on several platforms. Both of those guys are better baseball players in real life as opposed to being fantasy players, I feel. Birdie can help you really only in one category, I think, which would be stolen bases. And it's possible that if he gets some playing time, he could get you 2 or 3 in a week. That could really help you out. But I took a look at this, and I saw that Wendell has actually batted cleanup last night. And I don't know that he really fits the profile as a cleanup hitter, but anybody who's hitting cleanup in a major league lineup is somebody that interests me. And so I think I would lean a little bit more Wendell this time than Birdie. Although I think valid arguments can be made depending on what you need, that you could have one or both of those guys if you need them.
Yeah, I mean, I would lean Wendell as well. I mean, I will say that if Birdie actually can stick in the leadoff spot, at least he's going to get you some runs as well. As we always say, a leadoff hitter on a major league team is going to be rosterable in pretty much any league. I see no guarantee whatsoever that Birdie sticks in that leadoff spot, especially as Jazz comes back from his injury. And just the way Birdie plays, it's like you actually need to get on base, John Birdie, in order to be a valid leadoff hitter. And you also need to be on base in order to steal bases, which is what, like you said, what he brings mostly to the table.
Yeah, you can't steal first base, right?
Yeah, unless you get that pass ball on the third strike. And still, unfortunately, that doesn't go down as a stolen base for fantasy, which is really unfortunate. All right, Kevin, another IL stint. Max Muncy officially hit the IL on Saturday with elbow inflammation. The same elbow he tore his UCL in with last year. Who's getting the benefit of the extra or even everyday playing time for the Dodgers with Muncy on the shelf?
We are. And I know Mike is going to talk more about this when we get to the categories, so I'm just going to touch on it briefly. But Edwin Rios, as a designated hitter, every single game they played this week, hitting in the 5-hole, we are getting the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike. Well, we will leave that teaser for later, and we'll move on across the Beltway to the Angels, where Anthony Rendon hit the IL with wrist inflammation. Is there anyone worth looking at on the other side of LA? Not really LA, as I've been told, very specifically by others, to grab the majority of Rendon's playing time left on the table for the Angels?
Hey, look, it's another year with another Rendon IL stint. Shocking, right? It looks on the surface right now that it'll be a split between Tyler Wade and Matt Duffy, who, for reasons that I don't fully understand, is reverently adored by Joe Madden. He had him in Chicago when he was with the Cubs, and there were days that Matt Duffy was hitting cleanup, and it was like, holy cow, what is going on here? Wade's got some speed. He's got 4 steals so far on the season, no power, and a very middling batting average. I mean, his calling card is speed. I think he's got 38, 39 stolen bases in his career, but he's like a 216 hitter. So not somebody that's going to help you unless you really need that speed. Duffy really doesn't give you very much of anything other than just kind of being a warm body for a week if you need it. But Wade is a guy that I think if you need some steals, and who doesn't, that might be a guy that you take a look at. And he's also got multi-position eligibility. He's eligible at 4 spots on some platforms. So he's a guy that you might want to take a flyer on.
Yeah, Wade, not shy for sure. Tyler Wade, not shy to take a base. Not that good at it this year. Unfortunately, though, he's taken almost 20% of his shots. So of all the times he's been on first and second has been open, 1 out of 5 times, just about, he has attempted to take that next base. He's only been successful 57% of the time, unfortunately, which is not the going rate. Obviously, that unofficial target is 75%. As soon as you get lower than 75%, everybody just assumes you start getting at least a yellow, if not a red light, from your manager. So we'll see how that continues. If it continues, I think he's got to string together a couple of success stories on the base pass in order for me to be a little bit more confident in that aspect of his game. And as you mentioned, that is the only aspect of his game that most people, and that in the multi-positional eligibility, obviously if you have him on your bench in like a DC or something like that, he's viable because you don't have other options perhaps. But something to monitor if that's what you're eyeing Wade for, I think. All right, Kevin, I'm going to give you the pat on the back here. Michael Harris II gets the call for Atlanta, which I definitely, after you mentioned it, I was a little skeptical about personally. And I am very, very glad to be completely wrong on that and for you to be completely right. So well played, sir, after calling him out last week. But moving forward, how much of an impact to the Atlanta lineup do you think he's going to make, and how long can we expect him to stay, or do you expect him to, just be like a little cup of coffee and then jump back down?
I think it depends on him. If he can get on base because of his defense, he can stick. They've done this before, and there was talk on Twitter. People were even going way back and bringing up Andrew Jones. Last week I brought up Ronald Acuna Jr. and Ozzie Albies, bringing guys up when they're really young. On the other flip side of this, Pache, they gave him an opportunity and he didn't succeed or nearly to the level of any of those other guys. And he was up and down for a bit. So I think it's completely up to Michael Harris. And I think if he can get on base and then exhibit his speed on the base paths, that his defense will keep him in the lineup. He'll be at the bottom of the lineup, at least to start, and maybe for quite some time, even if he is performing. However, that's a pretty good Braves lineup. So we can expect, 4 plate appearances most games, even at the bottom of that lineup. And so if you need speed, and runs scored and stolen bases. He's someone definitely to look at. And for those of us in NFBC leagues, it's nice that he got in the game on Saturday rather than Sunday, like some of these other guys that have been coming up on the weekend recently. So he'll be in our player pools tomorrow, and he'll be in every one of them. Nobody was drafted a 21-year-old at AA. Yeah. So he'll be available in every league, and scored the Braves' only run in his first game on Saturday, going 1 for 3. So off to a good start.
Yeah, just the one strikeout as well. Looked pretty good. There's something to be said about the fact that he's batting ninth. There may be more opportunities for stolen bases because he's in that 9 hole, in that quote backup leadoff spot, if you will.
Exactly.
Way less plate appearances, potential plate appearances, of course. But the Atlanta lineup is no slouch, so he can definitely we could turn that thing over a couple times, and he could still get his 3 or possibly even 4 plate appearances every game, even in the 9 hole there. So I'm excited. All right, Mike, you alluded to him a little bit earlier, so I'll ask you about him, and that is Dallas Keuchel got DFA'd. Look at that. Can you just tell me, even as a White Sox fan, can you see him landing anywhere else that could make him actually rosterable in fantasy leagues again? And on the flip side, does this move free up any innings for anybody else for the White Sox?
Well, Dallas Keuchel has been DFA'd. Praise the Lord. Been waiting for that to happen for a while here in Chicago. He only really gave them 22 innings in May and 5 starts, and they were just really taxing the bullpen on the days that Keuchel was pitching. So looks like Lance Lynn will be back in about 2 weeks. He's going to make 3 rehab starts, they're saying. Cueto's looked pretty good. Johnny Cueto's looked pretty good in 2 starts tonight. A little bit shaky, but he only gave up 3 in the time that he was pitching. He was really struggling there. And it seems like in the White Sox mind, they think that Davis Martin and Vince Velasquez are better options right now than Keuchel. And you have to agree with that, even if you're not a White Sox fan. I wonder if a place where he might end up, I think Keuchel will get another opportunity based on the fact that he's got track record. He's a veteran. There's probably somebody out there that thinks he's going to figure out a way to get some time and distance between his fastball and his changeup. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I wonder about St. Louis. St. Louis has got some injuries. We talked about Hicks a little bit earlier. Steven Matz is out. Flaherty is out. They had Carlos Martinez, but they DFA'd him, as we spoke about earlier, too. On a team that plays good defense like the Cardinals, Keuchel could be a possibility. Or maybe there's a team that's terrible that's looking for somebody to eat innings. They only have to pay him the minimum. The White Sox are on the hook for $14 million for the rest of the year, which is just outrageous. But it is what it is, and I wish him well. I hope that he lands on his feet and improves.
First thing that I thought when I saw it was DFA'd was, please, Royals, do not do it. Because that's the type of team that will, just you're saying, a bad team that needs someone to eat an inning.
Yeah, you could totally see something like that happening. Obviously, any team that's contending is not going to have any interest in Dallas Keuchel.
Yeah, unless, again, they also need somebody to eat innings to hold on to like their young guys for the playoff rush in the end. And also if Keuchel's willing to take on like a 2 to 4 inning bullpen long relief role type of thing, which who knows, he might. He's only going 2 or 3 innings anyway at the start of games, so why not just do that in innings 4 through 6 instead? All right, Kevin, we'll stay with the White Sox for this last one here. Luis Robert won't be active for this weekend as it was announced, and may or may not be available through the first part of next week against the Blue Jays, possibly coming back against the Rays later on, but we'll see. Does this make Adam Engel rosterable with the assumption he'll continue to receive everyday reps in center field while Robert is out, remains out?
He gets a little bit of playing time anyway, typically, but it would be really hard for me to start him because we anticipate that Robert will be back possibly as early as Tuesday and hopefully, most definitely, in our NFBC type formats by the weekend, next weekend, to play him for the 3 days second half of our week. So I don't think so, just based on that. There's not any certainty that he's going to get the playing time. He's going to get the playing time while Robert is out. It's just with the Robert's return fairly imminent, but not an exact day, I would hate to have him in my lineup.
Yeah, and who's to say he might continue to get playing time even after Robert comes back, just from what I heard, Eloy Jimenez not doing so great in his first day in his rehab start down in AAA. We had to be pulled from the game, if I'm not mistaken. And so we'll see if there's any update to that by the time this episode goes live. That might extend Engel's run in the outfield, if not in center field, maybe one of the corners or what have you. All right, that's going to wrap up our news and notes section for this episode. As always, I'm sure we missed some things worth noting. To keep up with all the news of the day, make sure you're listening to the First Pitch podcast with James Schiano, Chad Young, and Scott Chu, which breaks down the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy league. In just a moment, we're going to talk to Mike about what it looks like to him to streaming hitters. So something I know his boss over at SB Streamer, Michael Simeon, likes to do himself, spoiler, as he's admitted on this very pod during the offseason. But before we do that, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
All right, we are back with On the Wire. I am Adam Howe, joined, of course, by Kevin Hasting, and this week's special guest, Mike Carter of Fantrax and SB Streamer, joins us to break down the FAAB, breakdown of this Sunday and all the possibilities you might be looking for. But before we do that, Mike, I want to pick your brain a little bit about one of your regular articles, the one you do over at SB Streamer, and that is the Streaming Hitters article, where you break down the options for if you're looking for a hitter to stream based on matchups and based on what have you. Let me hit you on this. What is exactly are you looking for? Like, what stats, what situations, what matchups do you value over all else when considering these hitter streamers that you're throwing out there?
Okay, so for me, it's really not very sophisticated, guys. When I look at the guys to stream for the week, what I'm looking at first and foremost is opportunity. I'm looking for guys that I know are going to get some playing time. I'm looking for the number of games that a team's playing that week. And that really dictates to me what I'm going to be looking for in a streamer for that week. And so I'm looking for somebody playing at least 6 games, hopefully 7 or more with these doubleheaders and things now that are happening. And I'm really looking for a guy that might be stepping into an injury situation, or a guy that looks like he might be starting to get into some playing time and trying to get into those guys maybe a week early. And a guy that I think of that kind of comes to mind for me as a streamer that I liked earlier on in the year is Kyle Farmer in Cincinnati, and that's proven to be a fairly good pickup at this point. He's a guy that was going to get an opportunity when people got sick, and he's taken it and run with it. He did 3 home runs in the last 2 days, and it's the kind of guy that I'm looking for. Somebody that's going to get an opportunity. I'm hoping that they're also going to be hitting higher up in the lineup, although that's always not a guarantee at that point. So if you can find somebody that's hitting in the top third of the lineup, find somebody who's got an opportunity to be playing 6 or 7 times a week, and find somebody that's looking like he's getting more of an opportunity. Those are the types of guys that I'm really keying in on when I'm streaming hitters for a week.
You mentioned Farmer's good example here to my next segues into my next question. Is it more or less valuable to convince yourself to stream week by week, forcing yourself to drop a player that you picked up the previous week and picking up a new player, the new flavor of the week, if you will, for consideration? Or to hold a good pickup when Farmer's been valuable? Like,
right.
I mean, how do you convince yourself to continue to stream? Kevin, you talk about this especially when it comes to like stashing relievers that might get a closer job. You don't want to necessarily keep revolving that stash, if you will. But this is a stream; it's different than a stash. So, Mike, which one are you focusing more on when are you just looking to any individual who might be looking in this particular week for a streamer, or is your strategy more like a starting pitcher streamer strategy where you are literally rotating a streamer every day or every week or what have you?
It's really similar to what you said on the latter part of that, Adam, I think, for me. I look at it very similarly to how you stream pitchers. I'm looking, like I said, I'm looking for the guys that have that opportunity like we were talking about earlier. But I'm also looking at that the last 2 or 3 spots on my roster are guys that are in constant churn, I call it. Like, they're not going to necessarily be guys that I'm going to hang on to for a long time. I'm trying to milk out statistics. And so I'm looking at a guy like we talked about Tyler Wade earlier. If I'm low on steals one week and I know that I'm 3 or 4 behind you in something, I want to pick up a guy that's going to try to cut that down for me a little bit and get me some stats there that I can use. But I won't probably keep a guy like Tyler Wade for more than a week or 2 at a time. And then I'll churn that and find somebody else to take the spot based on essentially looking at my roster and where I have holes, but then also looking at the guys and girls that are directly above me and below me, and trying to figure out how to stay ahead of the competition in that regard. And it's really hard to do in these competitive leagues. It's something that I've learned a lot the last few years. I'm relatively new to playing in these, I guess I would say, higher stakes leagues. I'm in TGFBI, I'm in Glarf, as you mentioned earlier. And I got my butt handed to me in Glarf last year because I did not stream well at all. And I ended up finishing last in the league. And I vowed to myself this year that I was going to really study the habits of my fellow players in our league and really take a longer look at what they were doing in terms of their roster churn and the guys that they were picking up and rostering in the league to help them with that streaming aspect of things. And what I really learned by doing that was that there's a lot of people streaming. And I had a tendency to hold on to guys that had been proven performers earlier in their careers and held on to guys way too long as opposed to not doing that. And so this year, what I've been able to do in TGFBI, where I've been first or second in TGFBI all year. And I think the reason why I've done that is because I'm far less married to players as I was last year. And I hope that strategy continues to work for me. So to answer your question, I always feel like the last 2 or 3 spots on your roster.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Mike, in general, just the streaming aspect. I think Kevin and I talk about that a lot. It's just not being too married to the players that you bring in, especially if you're playing in multiple leagues. It's really easy to do if you're in just a few leagues to really get attached to the players that you root for throughout the course of the season. You want to see do well. You want to see them all do well, or at least the ones that are on your team. The more teams you have, I think it's a little bit easier to separate yourself. Unless you're like me and you drafted Aaron Ashby like everywhere, you obviously want him to do well no matter what.
Right.
But if you diversify during draft season, then it's a lot easier to separate yourself from all that.
And
well.
Kyle Farmer is going to be really difficult to let go, as well as he's been playing the last few days. In fact, I don't think I'm going to. They have a day off on Monday, and then they have 4 of their 6 games at home in Great American Small Park this week. They start their first 4 of the following week there as well for a 7-game week. And then they have an 8-game week coming up with a doubleheader. So the schedule is favorable for as long as he's still getting the opportunity and in the lineup. They have a lot of games coming up still.
Yeah, that's the toughest part about streaming, especially streaming headers, is you get attached to the guys that you're streaming, and not even the guys that you drafted or you put all that capital into. And so something to looking ahead at what you're streaming them for. Are you streaming them just for this matchup coming up, or are you streaming them for, as Kevin, as you mentioned, like the semi long term schedule and the pitchers that they might be seeing, or the matchups they might be seeing, and what ballparks they're going to be in, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, all the injuries that we see going up every year play a much bigger part in whether or not you even have the ability to drop somebody.
That is so true. That is so true.
All right, let's talk about some players that we're going to want to pick up this week, or at least going to want to consider depending on the needs of your league. And we're going to go category by category as we tend to do, starting with the power category. Mike, I'm going to start with you. As we alluded to earlier in the show, I'm going to let you talk about Edwin Rios a little bit, and why is it that you think he's going to be one of the better power options on the wire this weekend?
As Kevin mentioned earlier, He's going to get a lot of playing time now with Max Muncy being out, and we don't know how long that's going to be. But Rios is a guy that's got a high pedigree. He's been highly thought of for a long time, has been waiting for an opportunity, and he really seems to be making the most of that opportunity right now. He's got 5 home runs in 45 at-bats over the last 3 weeks. He's hitting 286, which are very usable numbers in any format that you're playing in. Also, it comes with a high number of strikeouts. So if that's something you have to consider in your league, that's something you got to look at with Rios. I think he struck out 9 times in 26 at-bats this week so far. So that's something that's a little bit concerning, but he's producing. Seems to hit a home run every time he plays. And so Dave Roberts is using him as the DH. He's been hitting in the 5 spot. He's got a good lineup around him. The guy's got a high pedigree. I think maybe he's here to stay. Somebody that I definitely will be targeting this week.
Yeah, and so widely available in regardless of the size of your league as well. Somewhat surprisingly available in what looks like 90% of main event leagues across the NFBC format. So that's your 15 teamers. So definitely check your wire. He should be available. I know I've got him on a couple of draft and holds, so I'll be throwing him into the mix where I haven't already. Kevin, I'm going to let you go back to back here, go right into our speed category because it looks like you got 2 players on here on the same team. But start us off with your power pick for this weekend.
Yeah, it's not often when we're talking about these categories that we talk about a catcher, but William Contreras, Atlanta, has had a really nice run, and this week he's played every single day. On the days that he's not catching, he's been in the lineup as designated hitter when Ronald Acuna Jr. was either out or playing in the outfield. And he's actually played a game in left field himself. Had a hit in every game so far this week. Of course, we know he'd been hitting home runs all season. Until this evening, Sandy Alcantara shut most of the Braves down here on Saturday. But it looks like they're going to get William Contreras' bat in the lineup, whether he's the starting catcher or not. And then, of course, we alluded to his teammate earlier, Michael Harris II. He's my speed guy that I'm after this week. That's the appeal. I believe over 2 levels. It was 7 home runs, moderate power, but 20 stolen bases last season in the minors. And off to a good start in that category again in the minors this season. The big jump straight from Double-A. We'll see if he's relying solely on speed or if he actually knows how to steal bases, hopefully pretty soon. I was hoping he'd have an attempt on Saturday, but not yet.
Yeah, he can fly.
Yeah, Atlanta's
There's no doubt
shown
about
that
it.
they are willing to run if you know how to do it as well, attempting about over 7.5% of team stolen base opportunities, which is definitely above average across the league. So they if Harris can show quickly that he's able to handle it on the Major League Base Pass, then they should continue to let him do so, I think. Michael, is there a speedster out there that kind of fits this category, whether it's stolen bases or runs or a combination of both?
Yeah, so the guy that I'm interested in this category is Jose Siri. I'm not really sure that he can, but what he does seem to be able to do is run, and he's very aggressive on the base paths. He's stolen about 4 bases here in the last 2 weeks. Seems to be getting the bulk of the playing time in center field right now in Houston. Does not have a great spot in the lineup. He's usually hitting 8th or 9th, but he's a guy that's really aggressive out there and can really help you with stolen bases and subsequently with runs. He's almost like having a second leadoff hitter in that lineup. So he's a guy that I think I'm going to be targeting this week, especially in places where I'm looking for some speed and some runs.
Yeah, 83% stolen base success rate, not too bad, above average, as we mentioned earlier, and just shy of 20% of his opportunities he's attempted a stolen base. So he is definitely running. He has a green light, it sure seems, in Houston. The only problem is that Houston as a whole doesn't tend to run, but doesn't mean that they won't let the guys who know how to do it. It might just be opportunity based per se there. So series a good call out there as well. Why don't we move right into opportunity, Mike? And before we do that, I'm just going to briefly try to run down some schedule notes that people should be paying attention to. 14 teams do have a 7-game week, so plenty of teams have a full slate of games, including Baltimore, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Minnesota, Texas, Atlanta, Miami, Washington, the New York Mets, Chicago Cubs, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Colorado, The Dodgers, San Diego, and San Francisco all have at least 7 games, with Detroit, Minnesota, Milwaukee, and St. Louis all having a double header on top of that, so giving them 8 total games for next week. The Chicago Cubs actually have 2 doubleheaders, giving them a whopping 9 games next week. So lots of opportunities to rack up some extra plate appearances and or innings, especially those reliever options for the Cubs. Colorado will be back home for all 7 games of their week, hosting Miami for the first 3 and then Atlanta for the final 4. And there are no teams that have 2 days off next week, at least not a scheduled 2 days off. So you never know with rainouts and what have you. So lots of playing time, lots of games to enjoy next week. So with that being said, Mike, who might you be looking at to take advantage of some of these, whether they be the scheduling or the matchup situations that you see?
I'm going to stay in Chicago here, although for the other side of town. I like Nico Horner. And I think that the thing that's interesting for me with him is that David Ross this week said that Horner, coming back off the IL, was going to be the starting shortstop moving forward, which sends Andrelton Simmons to a reserve role, or tonight he actually started at second base, but Horner played shortstop. They don't really seem to be going anywhere as a team. I think that they're a below average team this year, even though they did beat the White Sox tonight. And I think they got to really see what they have in Horner. So I would anticipate that he's going to get a slew of at-bats. Doesn't have a ton of power, although he did hit a home run this week, but he's got the playing time option, and I think he's going to hit for average. He's also got 91st percentile sprint speed. And so I'd like to see that with guys that he can possibly help with runs and steals too. So Horner is a guy that I would be looking at. He's low rostered in just about every format that I've looked at this week, and somebody that I think you should take a look at, especially if you need middle infield help at this point.
Nice. All right. And Kevin, who are you looking at to fill this void, or somebody who's going to take advantage of the opportunity ahead of them?
Yeah, sticking with the Cubs here, I really like what Christopher Morel has done thus far. 22-year-old. What's really interesting about Morel is in 417 plate appearances at Double-A last season, he hit 220. He went up to Triple-A, and it was only 39 plate appearances, but he hit quite a bit better. And more plate appearances back in Double-A this season, 122 of them, hit over 300. A lot of that had to do with his strikeout rate dropping over 5 percentage points, getting down to below 25% when it had been near 30% last season. And that has stuck so far, only 37 plate appearances, only 9 games, but that has stuck so far at the major league level this season. And what's even more interesting than that is they're letting him lead off over the last 4 games, including Saturday. He's got a hit in every game except one, and they're turning him loose on the base paths, a couple of stolen bases. He showed some power, a couple of home runs. So a 9-game week, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. I don't see how we can go wrong here.
Yeah, I like the fact that you guys both took the low-hanging fruit with the 9-game work week
absolutely.
for the Cubs. Yeah, you got to take advantage of that whenever you see it. We talked about that with the A's. You talked about it last week, Kevin, with the Twins' upcoming schedule as well, especially when it comes to relievers. So it's something you have to take advantage of. You got to rack up those plate appearances, rack up those innings if you can. But in the 9-game week, it's a lot easier to take advantage of the hitters. So let's move on to our pitchers. And as we tend to do, let's move a little further ahead, looking at our future 2-start pitcher options. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of them for this episode, based on what we're seeing with 6-man rotations, perhaps with extra injuries, just question marks, call-ups, what have you. Again, this list that I put together for these guys is based on starting pitchers that are rostered in 50% or less of Yahoo leagues and are tentatively looking to get a 2-start week, not this coming week, but the following week. So the quick list that I've got in front of me, so short, I'm just going to list it off for everybody. Cal Quantrill, Hunter Green, John Gray, Reed Detmers, Rich Hill, Daniel Lynch, and Humberto Castellanos. Mike, why don't you give me a guy here that of this list that you'd be the most interested based on the matchups that you see, with the first one being who they're facing next week, and the last 2 on here are who they're tentatively slated to go up against in their 2-start week. And then give me a guy you think that people might be looking at that you'd probably be fading.
So I like Quantrill out of this group just based on the matchups, and I think that he's got a good opportunity here to throw some quality innings and give you some benefit here. One guy that I think I would be fading in this group is Rich Hill. He didn't look so great against the White Sox the other night, and most pitchers have looked pretty good against the White Sox lately. I just always worry with a guy who's 42 and might only give you 3 or 4 innings. I just don't see the wisdom in using him unless you can absorb that type of a situation with your team. I would fade Rich Hill.
Yes, I feel like, strangely enough, we've been talking a lot about Rich Hill on this show. Not sure why all the time, but his name tends to pop up both in good and not so good ways. Kevin, do you agree with the two names that Mike gave, or do you have somebody else that stands out in either direction?
No, I agree. But I also like Daniel Lynch has performed better recently. And he's got a nice schedule coming up. It seems crazy saying nice schedule when one of those teams is Toronto, but they have not hit the ball well for quite some time. And then Baltimore as well. And both of those games being at Kauffman Stadium 2 weeks from now for the 2-start week. And at Cleveland, I would hope I had a better option, but it's not one I would completely run away from. I don't think I would. We love Hunter Green's fastball. We love Hunter Green. We love watching Hunter Green pitch. And it's going to be so tempting to get that start against Arizona in a couple of weeks. But I don't want anybody facing St. Louis right now. They are just crushing the baseball. So that's the one that I think might have some people on it because of the Arizona start, but I would be avoiding the St. Louis start.
Yeah, that Cardinal Devil magic. It'll get you every time.
For sure.
All right, well, let's stick a little bit closer to home with this coming week. Kevin, who might you be looking for that could add some wins in case some counting stats to your pitching categories for this coming week?
Yeah, I like Dylan Bundy this week. I liked him last week. Originally, when we recorded last Saturday, it looked like he might have gotten the 2 starts last week, but now it appears this week he will get the 2 starts. He gets Detroit again. That's a gimme. I'm not even worried about him facing them in 2 starts in a row. And then he gets the Toronto Blue Jays, who we just talked about. And against right-handed starters, they're 20th in the league in OPS. That just seems insane, but they are. So he gets the 30th and the 20th ranked teams in OPS versus right-handed pitchers this week in his 2 steps. He's got that blow-up potential. We know he does, but I'm taking that risk this week.
Yeah, as we mentioned last week, sometimes you're in a situation where you have to take those risks, especially if you're really low on FAAB, and Bundy's just the one that ends up falling to you. You got to take that 2-start. You got to get that volume. Who's your volume play this week, Mike? And then I'll let you go right into your ratio play as well, so you can talk about as many pitching categories as you like on this one.
Okay, so the guy that I'm looking at this week, a guy that I've rostered in a couple of places quietly, is Dane Dunning for Texas. Slowly, his K rate has gone up. He did give up 5 runs in his last start, but he also struck out 8 guys. And I think he's a really good pitcher. I think he's got obviously a good opportunity there in Texas. I got to see him pitch when he was with the White Sox, and I was sorry to see him go, although getting Lance Lynn for him was really a nice get for Rick Hahn and the White Sox. I really think that he's a guy that you can keep there and play the matchups with. He's got Seattle next weekend, and I like that matchup for him. Seattle's not really having a very good year at this point so far. So that's who I'm going with there is Dane Dunning. Talking about ratios and looking at ERA and WHIP, and a guy that I'm interested in as well is Jalen Beeks in Tampa Bay. He's quietly flying under the radar. He's back from injury. He's got a win. He's got a 1.29 ERA and a 0.81 WHIP. And I'm wondering if the Rays are going to start using him in a higher level leverage. It seems like he's always had value as a bulk reliever for them. So who knows? They could use him towards the end of games right now with Andrew Kittredge hurt and Ryan Thompson struggling. Beeks could emerge as a person in the Rays bullpen. We know that the Rays are not afraid to mix and match roles there. So Beeks is a guy that I have some interest in this week.
Yeah, who knows how many innings he can get at the beginning of game 2 if he is opening. I mean, they don't only go 1 inning all the time, especially in Tampa Bay. He could, at least get the 2-inning bulk roll in there at the beginning of games as well. So, like the Beast call out. Anybody going to chip away your ratios next week?
Yeah, I'm looking at Dylan Coleman in Kansas City. We talked about him either late in the offseason or right after the season started as someone that may at some point, depending on who the Royals trade near the deadline, may be in line for some saves. Recently, they've been allowing him to get more outs in his appearances. He had 2 full innings versus the Twins this evening. So and his ratios at first glance look pretty good, not great. They were much better prior to 3 outings ago. He had an ERA right around 2. His whip wasn't anywhere near the 1.4 something it is now. Had a couple of rough outings, and then he's bounced back in his last 2, including the 2 innings versus the Twins this weekend. So if they're going to continue to let him get more than 3 outs, then he can chip away at those ratios. I believe in 3 of his last 9 appearances have been at least 4 out appearances.
All right, nice. Let's move on to everybody's favorite category. Of course, that is saves. Mike, you do a regular article over at Fantrax looking at bullpens. So I'm gonna start with you on that one. Who might you be looking at, whether it's speculation or you just have a really good hunch on what's going on for next week or beyond for save opportunities that might be available on the wire?
Sure. Wouldn't surprise me at all if Mark Melanson lost the closer job in Arizona. His ERA is over 7. He's got an 11% K rate, which is the worst of his career thus far. He's 37. And I think we all knew that the slope would be slippery for a 37-year-old closer who doesn't throw hard. And so I think if he should continue to struggle, they've got a built-in option there with Ian Kennedy, who has not also been great, but he's been way better than Melanson has been. And Kennedy's got 3 saves already as well. So I think he would be the logical choice to close games in the desert. If they really wanted to get wild, they could try Joe Mantiply, but I think Kennedy is the guy there that I would be handcuffing with Melanson. Granted, I don't know how many high-stakes players are using Mark Melanson as a closer to try to get saves right now, although Melanson does have 10 saves, but he's also got 5 losses. So it would not surprise me at all if changes were coming there. I know that Torey Lovullo gave him the dreaded vote of confidence last week, and then he did pitch one good game, and then he had another one that was really pretty bad after that. It would not surprise me at all if Melanson lost that job in Arizona.
Man, I feel like we've been saying this about him for years.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We have.
I agree. I agree. Kennedy is still the handcuff there, no matter how bad he has been pitching, just because you have to assume that Arizona is going to want to at least showcase him so that he can build up some kind of trade value come the deadline, which is just what Ian Kennedy's been used for the last couple of years, no matter where he ends up signing. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be hard to speculate on pretty much anything out of Arizona, but desperate times comes for desperate measures, so I totally get it.
Absolutely.
Kevin, are you speculating anywhere, or do you have a hunch on an actual save opportunity for this week?
It isn't really a speculation. I think David Robertson is the closer in Chicago for the Cubs. We saw that he came back from his COVID IL stint. They put him right back in the role. Even after he blew a save, he came right back and got the save. So he is the Rowan Wick, who a lot of us were drafting, especially earlier in draft season, speculating that he could be the Cubs closer, has performed nearly as well. And I believe is 3 for 3 in save opportunities while David Robertson was on the IL. They have that 9-game schedule this week. Now, I know the Cubs have only won 18 games, and that's going to contribute to this. But David Robertson has only pitched on back-to-back days 1 time all season. In a 9-game week, if the Cubs can put some wins together, Rowan Wick could get a chance or 2 at a save this week. Not somebody I'd probably hang on to as my speculative closer, but I could see putting him in my starting lineup this week.
My hand was the one that was being raised in the back of the room when you mentioned who some of us have been drafting Rowan Wick early in draft season for speculating on who the club's closer was going to be. I got him a couple places already being stashed in some draft and holds. Still available in plenty of my FAAB leagues, though. So we'll take a look at him this coming Sunday night. All right, and then moving on to our final section of recommendations. Here's our wild card section. More speculation than you know what to do with, whether it's stashing IL guys, some just guys that are on the bench currently, maybe prospects. And Kevin, since your recommendation from last week worked out so well, I'm going to start with you here. I mean, who do you got for us to stash
this week? I'm going with a guy that'll be coming back from injury, hopefully pretty soon. It's not imminent, but it's getting about that time if you want to grab him for next to nothing, where he's available. Nick Lodolo of the Reds is available in over a third of the 15-team main events and over 2/3, nearly 70% of the online championship 12-team leagues. He has begun his rehab assignments, and It sounds like they want that to continue for at least 3 weeks. So not imminent, but it's about the time that the price will start going up in the near future.
And of course, with this section, it's always about what kind of flexibility you have with your bench and how many IL spots you have in your league format and what have you. So if you're playing with those with no IL spots and you've already got 3 or 4, maybe this is not the route to go. But if you have that flexibility, I like to call out for sure. All right, Mike, of course, our wildcard section, I'll let you end this off here. Who do you got as your wildcard stat? It might not be a smash. It might be just somebody we haven't talked about yet that didn't fit into a category.
Yeah.
Who do you like here in this category?
I looked at this one a little differently. I didn't think of it so much as an IL stash as I looked at it from the standpoint of a guy who's getting some opportunity based on other people around him being hurt or ineffective, and that's Tyrone Taylor for Milwaukee. He's got a path to everyday at-bats, it seems like to me right now. He's been playing center field over Lorenzo Cain, which is a good thing, and the injury to Hunter Renfroe makes it really look like he might be getting to play most days there. He's got 4 home runs and 19 RBIs at this point. And last year, I think people forget, this is a guy that hit 12 home runs there in limited playing time. Definitely has got some power, a guy that I think could help you out, especially in the next couple of weeks as Milwaukee tries to get their guys back to health a little bit. So Tyrone Taylor is a guy that you might want to think about stashing if you can grab him.
I feel like the theme of this episode is just let's talk about all the guys that are sitting on my bench in my draft and hold leagues. And so plenty of Tyrone Taylor as well.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice to know that he's there in those formats. Unfortunately, it doesn't do me much good in my FAAB league, but I like the call out nonetheless. All right, well, that's going to do it for recommendations. I think we've got a lot of really good recommendations for everybody to consider as they're making their bids on Sunday night. Kevin, why don't you take us out with any final words of wisdom you might have at this point in the season for everybody listening?
I just want to remind everybody, it's stuff we know. It is Memorial Day weekend. Hope everybody's having a nice holiday weekend. Many people wait until this weekend to start really looking at things, but taking a look at your categories in many of my leagues, when I have been taking a look at them recently, there are some that are really bunched up. And while I may be towards the bottom of that category, I am by no means anywhere out of it. So don't just look at where you're ranked in each category. Look at how the tiers shake out and see what's realistically what you need to start working on. Some of them, yeah, you're in 11th place in stolen bases, but 4 stolen bases, you'd be in 4th. I'm really not looking to make a lot of change there. I just need a little bit of luck over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, just be meticulous but with what you're looking at in the standings, and I like that call out for sure. I'm going to echo something we've talked about before. It is, like Kevin, like you said, it's also a holiday weekend. And the holiday weekends are the times to take advantage of the fact that people aren't paying as much of attention.
Especially when people have Monday off.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, Monday off. They're doing some fun stuff on Sunday night rather than sitting at their computer tinkering with their bids. So take advantage. Don't be that one, and just make sure that you get your bids in at the very least. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. Mike, I want to thank you once again for joining us, man. I really appreciate it. Can you take a second to remind everybody where they can find you, what you do, and where they can find your work?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It was really a pleasure to be on with you guys. I've been following you for a long time and have been a big fan, so being able to be on with you is really an honor for me. You can find me on Twitter. I have the worst Twitter handle of all time, I've been told, at MDRC0508. I joined Twitter about 4 or 5 years ago just to follow my daughter who was on Twitter. I came up with that ridiculous moniker. You can find my work. Primarily, I work at Fantrax and at SP Stream. I also work for another website called 990 Know-It-All, where I write more narrative pieces, rambling 1,000-word diatribes on baseball. And you can find me on Twitter there. I'm on there just about every day. I love getting questions. I love people direct messaging me and having that conversation with people. It's an honor to be able to do these things, and a privilege that I never thought that I would ever have. I'm an older guy now. I'm in my late 40s, and I never foresaw that I would get an opportunity to write about fantasy baseball. And I have that now. I love it. I'm trying to really stick with it. My goal every day is to just be humble, remain positive as much as I can on a daily basis. So thank you guys so much for having me again. I really enjoyed it.
Mike, more voices like that, the better in this industry. So it was an honor of ours to just have you on with us. I appreciate taking the time and really appreciate the great advice you were able to give our listeners. And you make sure everybody is out there is reading Mike's work over at SB Streamer and Fantrax, following bullpens and getting those streaming header recommendations each and every week. That's going to wrap it up for episode 61 of On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back every Sunday with detailed FAAB breakdowns throughout the 2022 season. And, of course, keep a lookout for Kevin's companion article over at pitcherlist.com. It comes out every Sunday afternoon as well. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And Kevin is at HastingKevin. And, of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to thank our guest, Mike Carter, for joining us once again. Follow him on the Twitter at MDRC0508. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening. And with that, we bid you goodbye.